to me about how you prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you. You are a college student. You are busy and you're doing this podcast. So what does your self-care look like?
So as you mentioned, I am a college student and I am also a freelancer. So I guess you could say I work part-time while also managing this podcast. So it can definitely be a lot. I'm also a senior. So there's a lot of extra stuff going on, trying to prepare for graduation and just thinking about my future in terms of my career and even furthering my education. So I find that self-care definitely keeps me mentally sane for sure. So there's a couple things that I like to do. I definitely have days where I just do things solely for me. So I call those days my off-limit days. So I have friends who are like, yeah, like, do you want to hang out on this day? Okay, so how it works at the school is that a lot of people try not to have classes on Fridays. Like there are Friday classes, but a lot of people don't schedule classes on Fridays. So a lot of people have those days free and usually they're like, oh, let's hang out, let's do something. Fridays is a very, very important day for me because I go to school every day, Monday through Thursday. So I just need that break to just kind of get my life together, get my head on straight, you know, sleep late, all that stuff. So I immediately tell them, no, that is my off limit day. So I just make sure that I schedule that time to just relax and reset. And as for actually doing self-care, it's very different. There's no one set way to actually have self-care. Some people it's, like taking a bath for an hour or resting or meditating. For me, I personally love going on long walks, especially if it's sunny outside. I like to just take in the sun, go for a nice walk. My neighborhood is relatively quiet during the day, which is great. So I just like to embrace that quiet time and I don't want to say not talk to people because that sounds really bad. Sometimes you just need that break. So just taking that break from talking to people, just spending time by myself, going on a nice quiet walk, that really does help me. And another thing that I like to do is, so I play an instrument. It's called the bass clarinet. So I find that music really helps to ground me as well. It's just something that I've loved doing for so many years. And I like to practice the things that I love, such as playing the bass clarinet and also making sure that I eat. That's a big thing with us college students. A lot of complaints that my friends have is that they haven't eaten since like 8 a.m. and it'll be 4 p.m.
And they feel terrible and they can't figure out why.
Exactly. They're always tired, no energy. And they're getting gummy bears from the vending machine. I'm like, that's not a meal.
It's not sustainable.
It's not a meal, especially when you're young and your metabolism is crazy. Like you need to feed yourself to actually function. Yeah. So another thing that I like to do is making sure that I eat. I like to meal prep on Sundays. That's another day that is off limits, and make sure that I actually have food for the week, and I make sure that I take the time to sit down and eat my food. So for sure. So I would say my top 3 things is going on nice quiet walks, playing my instrument, and making sure that I actually eat food.
Yeah. You know, those things sound like pretty basic, but it's amazing how easily we knock those to this, I'll do it later. No, exactly. You need that. You need that. So important. I love your off limit days. That's brilliant. That's a beautiful self-care and boundary you've set up. Don't lose that as you leave college and go out into the work world and become, and start adulting. That is going to serve you so well. And the fact that you've started that now and you've set that expectation with your people now, so smart. I love that you shared that. I've got it written down like, off limit. I like the way sorry guys, because it's true. We've got to have time to refill. And if we don't set aside time for that, it just keeps getting put aside, and everybody does it in a different way. And you've identified those ways that work for you. I love that. That's so good. Confidently setting boundaries. You've set that boundary already. You've got your off limit day. You've set that. When did boundaries come into play for you? When did you know they were needed? Did you know that you needed did you know what they were? I mean, that's become a topic we've talked about more, I think, the last few years, but especially as, a young 20-something in college. Talk to me about your boundaries journey.
Yeah. So something about me that I've realized in the past few years is that I really used to be a chronic people pleaser. And that stems a lot from like my childhood and my whole family situation. But I always felt the need that it's like, I have to do something that at least makes the other person happy. So it's like, if they want me to go to that thing with them, but I'm like sick, I would still say, yeah, even though I feel horrible. But it really just got to a point where I felt just tired. I felt drained. I felt tired. And as a human being, you try to figure out, why do I feel this way?
Yeah. And
I would definitely say that something that's really, I guess, great about my generation is that we're not afraid to talk about mental health. And especially when I was in high school, that was a very big topic for my school, because even talking about it with my parents, they're like, oh, we never had anything like that in my high school. Like, what is that about? Yeah. They talk a lot about mental health and the things that can cause your mental health to just not be good or where it's supposed to be as a young person. And they would also do talks about people pleasers, because in my school, we had a lot of overachievers, but they would more so do the most as a way to make their parents happy or to make their family happy and proud of them, instead of trying to do that for themselves. Yeah. So that's when I started to see a little bit of overlap in my life, where it's like, wow, like I'm saying yes to all these people. I'm doing all of these things that I really don't want to be doing and shouldn't be doing, simply because I want to satisfy these other people. Yeah. And that's when I'm like, no, because I'm already tired as it is, juggling all these extracurriculars in school. This needs to end right away. And I was raised to have a very strong personality, to use my voice, to be able to stand up for myself and stuff like that. So it kind of started in the high school era when I realized that I really shouldn't be doing these things that are draining for me, but helping others. Like, it should be mutually beneficial. Yeah. So that's what I had to learn. Like, I had to let go of that guilt of saying no, let go of that guilt of just walking away, and just be assertive about, this is not what's good for me right now, so I'm not going to do it. So I really had to let go of that guilt and learn to just use my voice to be able to protect myself, protect my peace, I guess you could say.
Sure. That's a great way of putting that. And again, so good that you know this now. It's going to serve you so well. There are so many women in my generation, myself included, where we didn't reach that point till well into our 40s and sometimes 50s. And that's an exhausting way to live. So again, so good. And I have 3 daughters, and I agree with you. They saw, I think, what was happening with us, with their parents. They're like, there's got to be a better way to live. There's got to be a better way to do this. This does not look fun or sustainable. So I love that you spoke to that and that you've gotten on it at this point in your life. That's going to serve you so well. Now, when it comes to your height, I've heard you talk about in some of your episodes, we'll get to a little bit later what your podcast is called, and we'll give you a chance to share that so people can tune in. But you've also had to deal with boundaries around that with people. So talk to me about that, because that could be a whole other challenging topic and thing to try to approach with people.
Yeah, there's definitely two sides, I could say for sure with that. There's the side where you're dealing with the strangers or the random people in the street that you know for a fact that you will never see again.
Yeah.
And then you have the people who are closer to you. So with the strangers, I feel like it's definitely easier in terms of setting that boundary because they're not involved in your life like that. So it's easy to just walk away unless they're like actually like physically attacking you or something like that. It's just it's just like walk away and just leave it be. But in terms of like your peers or your friends or even family members, it's a lot harder because to some extent, like you care about those people, you care what they think about you, you care about their opinions to some extent, even if it's not like to a great extent, at least a little bit, you care what they think and what they say about you.
Yeah.
So for them to be saying something rude, like, oh, like you're looking a little shabby today, or like those jeans are just not fitting you today. Those jeans are a little too short for you today. That dress or that skirt, I got that a lot. That dress or that skirt is a little too short for you today. You should not be wearing that. Stuff like that kind of just like, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So it's just trying to have that conversation with them. It could definitely be hard, but it's necessary at times. It's necessary to say, I don't like what you said. I appreciate it if you just wouldn't say that again. Or I would appreciate it if you don't speak to me that way. Or I would appreciate it if you said it in a different way or like a different tone. Just being able to voice like how their comment made you feel and then provide suggestions as to what could sound better or be better for that relationship is very important.
Yeah.
And there are people who will not respect it. I'm not going to lie. You will think that they care about you, but deep down, they really don't respect it and they don't respect your boundaries. And you just have to be strong enough and you have to be willing to just be at peace with that and just walk away from that situation. Because it's better to walk away and feel that short-term pain of walking away from someone that you once cared about and then just getting over it after some point than just keeping that person for so long and them just draining you, draining your vibe, draining your energy. So sometimes you really need to know when to walk away. But if you at least tried to have that conversation with them, you can say that you tried. So definitely talking it out with that person is very important in setting boundaries in terms of like them talking about your body.
Yes. And I think, unfortunately, so many times you get a lot of gaslighting within that. We're like, well, that's not what I meant.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what, you meant. What matters is, or what your intent was, what matters is the effect that it had on me. So we need to talk about that so that if you don't want your words to have that effect on me, then we've got to talk about a different way of framing that, or that's just a topic you don't address. Or the next time, before you say something, think about, hey, if I were in her shoes, if I were in her situation, how would that make me feel?
Exactly.
Something that, but I think that it's so many times people make the comments get very defensive and they get very wrapped up in what their intent was, or or they're like, oh, you're being too sensitive, or no, I'm not. You're not. You don't get to invalidate my feelings. You don't get to minimize my experience. It's my experience. I can recognize that was not your intent. It still had an effect on me. So let's talk about a way to reframe this next time. And if they truly care, then they will invest. And that can be tricky too, because people that, like you said, like, okay, well, if they're not willing to respect that and invest that, change, that I don't need to have my energy depleted in that area.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. Obviously, these comments you deal with take a toll on that. You're a busy college student. You're a 20-something in a wild world. Talk to me about your emotional health, physical health journey, how you see those connections, how you address that. Just talk to me about that.
Yes, I definitely believe that your mental and emotional health is connected to your physical health. Something that I really noticed, and that's even been like said even in studies and articles, even on TV and videos. A prime example is like if you're extra stressed or you're always sad or like angry or something, that can literally cause sickness in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not even, you can be taking care of yourself, eating well, exercising and stuff like that, but if your mental is not right, your physical is going to feel it as well. And it's the same the other way around. If you're not taking care of your physical, you're gonna feel it mentally too. So I think seeing that connection can help answer a lot of questions for people. It can help answer a lot of questions as to why you're feeling a certain type of way, especially because I live in New York City. So it's basically the city of workaholics.
Yeah.
And it's like people are getting sick all the time. And you're wondering, oh, like maybe it's just because I'm traveling on the subway a lot or I'm catching it from other people. No, like a lot of these people work 12, 14, 16-hour days. They're not getting enough rest. They're constantly stressed at work, or they're constantly stressed in their personal life, or they're thinking about things that are just making them, they're not able to really focus on themselves and help to calm themselves down. So I think that just realizing that there's a connection between the two can help answer a lot of questions. And just as you take care of your physical, it's important to take care of your mental and vice versa. You can't just like only take care of one aspect or only take care of the other aspect. It's important to really balance that out.
Yeah.
So yes, exercising, for example, is good for your physical, but it can also be good for your mental. But if you're working out, but you're stressing about that work project that you have to do later that day, that kind of defeats the purpose.
Absolutely. Well. Yeah. Yeah.
So in each activity that you do that you're saying, oh, like this is particularly for my physical health, also that you also have to think about how can this particular activity also take care of my mental health and my emotional health, because we're pretty time sensitive here. So being able to kill two birds at one stone.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Very, very useful. And taking care of your mental and emotional health doesn't necessarily have to look like doing stuff for your physical health as well. Like processing your emotions, that's a very good thing to do. Letting yourself sit in your emotions, or as we would say, feel your feels, be in your bag or whatever. Mm-hmm. Being able to just let yourself cry, and that's another thing. Scream singing, that's very helpful. If you have a car, or if you live by yourself, or if you want to do it in the street, go for it. Being able to just sing a song but like scream it at the top of your lungs, that releases so much stress and so much anger. Like it's so, like after you do that you're going to feel like a different person. That's all I can say. But it's really important to find what works for you in terms of helping you process your emotions, because I know that it could be harder for others due to trauma and all of that. So you really have to find what works for you in terms of taking care of yourself emotionally and mentally. But finding ways to like take care of all aspects of your health at once, I think that's definitely something that could be useful for you.
Yeah, I love the scream singing. That's brilliant. I mean, and I think it's just finding that thing, that works for you. And I love that you address that we've got to be willing to feel our feelings. It's those, because if you stop them, they will come back to bite you later. And it won't look pretty. And it could be physically that it shows up. It could be mentally that shows up. I am a person who gets sick when I'm stressed. If I have ongoing stress, even if I'm doing my daily workouts, even if I'm doing my daily yoga, walk, whatever it is, journaling. I can be doing all the things. But if I'm not listening to my body and being like, you've done enough today, you need to step aside, I will get sick. I mean, so it's us trusting your body and listening to it, but letting yourself sit and know that you can feel multiple things at one time.
At once, exactly.
Yeah, you can feel super excited that I kicked butt on my midterms, and also super angry that professor made me go the extra mile on something that I already did. That's just an example that you might be living right now, but just that understanding and making room for all of it, not pushing one to the side or the other. So I'm so glad you spoke to that. And I love the scream singing. That's a great one. You can do that. You can do that in the car, driving down the road, whatever age you are, whether you're driving to class, driving to work, you're going to pick up your kids, scream sing. There we go. That's your takeaway from today. Okay, that's awesome. I love that. How can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically? You're doing that already by having this podcast and giving a voice to the tall girls and tall women out there. But talk to me about your journey, why you decided to do that, and how you feel supported by other women.
It's very interesting how I started this podcast, actually. It's called the Tall Girls Podcast. But it was okay. It all started when I think it was a freshman. It was either freshman or sophomore year. I got invited to be on a podcast for my school. So somebody reached out in this group chat, this Discord group chat. I was like, yeah, if anybody wants to be part of this college podcast, you could just sign up here. So of course I signed up because I was like, why not? Trying to put myself out there, no regrets, all of that stuff. So she reached out and we had the podcast, and it was really good. It was a very long recording too. It was a very good recording. And then at the end, I just remember her saying do you have your own podcast? And I told her no. And she told me that I should start one. And I was like, that's very interesting that she would say something like that to me. So that kind of stuck in the back of my head for a while. And then a little segue, I was also starting to have post-grad anxiety, even though I just started college, which is really weird. But I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to start working. I have absolutely no experience. What am I going to do? So I remember that comment when she first said it, and I was like, you know what, screw it. Let's just do it. Let's just start this podcast. Because that was also during the pandemic, so I was completely online. So I wouldn't say I had absolutely nothing to do. Yeah, I had my classes, but there was nowhere to go. I was not seeing any friends. I was just in my room all day. So I was like, you know what, why not? I have nothing else besides school to do. So I would do research, what should I talk about? And then I remember this article that said you should be talking about something that you could talk about for at least 6 months. And I'm sitting here at least 6 months. It would have to relate to my life, of course. And me being me, I'm going through the things that I just talk about a lot. And something that I fell upon was my height. I rant about it on an almost daily basis. Even after starting this podcast, to this day, I always have something to say about my height. So I figured, you know what, let's just start a podcast about being tall. So I started putting that into effect. And when I first started it, it was literally just a rant. It was me ranting about being tall. But it wasn't until I got my first few messages from my first few listeners on that podcast, and they were all like, oh my gosh, this is so relatable. I understand how you're feeling and all that good stuff. And it wasn't until then when I realized maybe I should be trying to foster positivity in this, because even at that time, I still was not confident in my height. I hated being tall, and it wasn't a good time for me. Yeah. So I figured, fake it. I was on a fake it till you make it mentality. And this was one of the very few instances that actually worked for me, where I was trying to provide tips and advice for other tall women who were listening to it. And I was like, why am I not applying this in my own life? Hello, I need to start taking my own advice. And that's when I did, in terms of like setting boundaries, like we spoke about earlier, and saying my affirmations in the morning, and also just finding clothes that work for me. Just small little things that really just help to boost my self-esteem and boost my confidence. So that is ultimately how the podcast got started. And here we are, like 2.5 years later, a little less than 2.5 years later. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, and then, so that's how you show up for other women unapologetically. How do you feel supported by other women?
Oh, okay. So, I try to surround myself with other women who are like on that we don't care what other people think attitude. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So sometimes like it's important to take risks, right? So there are times where I'll like not bad risky behavior, but the good risky behavior.
Yes.
Like, yeah, go up to that random stranger and talk to them, or go talk to that professor about your business idea, this, that, and the other. So sometimes I'll ask them like, oh my gosh, should I do this? Should I do that? And one of the main things I'll always say is YOLO, or just do it.
Yeah.
We like saying do it for the plot. Because I used to say that a lot in some of my episodes, and even some of my listeners will say it back to me, like, do it for the plot. And it's just like, sometimes you really have to do it for the character development. You really have to do it for your story, because your whole entire life is a narrative and you're the author. So it's like, what are you going to do to keep the plot fresh and keep it going?
I love that. That's a great way to think about that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, so I try to surround myself with people who are like, do it for the plot mentality, and they're always willing to provide advice. And that's, that's like the other thing. It's like I'm meeting a lot of strangers on social media, and it's like they're just so willing to provide some type of support, even though they may be like on the other side of the country or the other side of the planet. They're always like, yeah, if you want to talk, just let me know. Mm-hmm. Or yeah, if you need advice, just let me know. If I ask them for help, or even something as simple as the other day, I asked for some reviews. Like I just put on my story, like, yeah, like just leave me a review, because why not?
Yeah.
And then people actually left a review and then DM'd me saying they left me a review and that my podcast deserves like all the praise in the world or something. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Even though it's something small, it's just like they're just always willing to like provide some type of support for my endeavors, even if it's something as small as that. Yeah. That's something that I really, really appreciate about them. So they do it for the plot mentality, and they're always willing to be there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
That's really what helps me.
I love that. So good. I love the do it for the plot. I'm going to remember that. That's a really good, because, it's like that thing. It's like, am I going to regret it more later that I didn't do it? Yeah. I mean, because I think that's what you got to think about too. It's like, I've grown into that mentality as I've gotten older. I wish I'd had it when I was your age. It would have served me. It would have served me so much better. So I love hearing that. That's awesome. The importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values. I mean, you've got a lot of, time constraints and issues that probably goes a little bit back to your off limit time. But talk to me about what you say yes and no to and how you determine that.
Going back to your why, this is a very passionate topic for me. I'm very passionate about this topic because there are so many times where I'm like, should I just finish school? Because it could just really be so stressful at times. Like I'm grateful to be able to be in a country where I can get an education without much problems, and I'm able to get an education for free on top of that. Mm-hmm. So I try to just look at okay, like I have this opportunity, I should be taking it. But there are just so many moments where I'm just sitting there at 3 a.m. trying to read a super long chapter, or I'm trying to work, but then something comes up with like school for like a project or something that's super last minute. And I'm just like, I just feel like I should have graduated a long time ago, and I just don't want to be here. But coming back to your why, like, why am I here? That helps so much. It's like, I'm here to get my degree so I can set myself up for a prosperous future. I'm here so I can get my degree so I can get further education. I'm here to get my degree to network with other people who have similar interests to me, and to take advantage of the resources, meet professors that are willing to provide advice for me in terms of my career and my future. I had to think about why I'm even sitting here at 3 a.m. reading this long chapter. I'm doing it for future India. That's what I have to keep telling myself. I feel like that's quite literally the only way I got through these like almost 3.5 years of university, because there were a lot of trying times. So if you have a very valid why as to why you're doing something, when the going gets tough, you remember that why, and then you're like, okay, I can work through this. If you feel like your why is not valid enough, if you don't have good enough reasons for your why as to why you're doing that, then you shouldn't be doing it. But if your why is like something that's super important to you, then you really, really have to keep going. Even if that means making sacrifices and saying no to the plans with your friends, and saying no to even like the dangerous things that they want you to partake in, but it may seem fun in the moment. You have to be willing to make those sacrifices so that future you will be taken care of, and future you will be happy. Yeah. So you just have to, if it doesn't align, if the things that you are asked to do, whether from your peers, your friends, your professors, your family, if it doesn't align with that why either, then you need to take a second to think about whether or not you should be actually doing that thing. Because for the most part, a lot of things should be aligning with your why. So I think that if you have a good why, it's gonna get you through a lot of tough times.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. I love how you spoke to that. You've got such a great, grasp on that. And it is important. It does carry you, but it also is an indicator of what you should and shouldn't be involved with, what it is, where you should be putting your time, what to say yes and no to. And it's okay to like get down the road and be like, wait a minute, because there might be something that aligned with your why 5 years ago, and maybe it doesn't align with your why anymore. So, being willing to analyze that as you go, but having that strong sense of knowing how important that is will help you. You will catch those things rather than continuing on to do those things and then wondering why you feel drained and exhausted, all the time. It's like, time out here. This is, if this isn't aligning, then, I need to rethink and get myself back in alignment. But I love what you said about that. So good. Living out of your own expectations versus others. The expectations thing is huge across the board as a human. And then you throw in the expectations thing as a tall woman walking around the streets of New York. Oh, my Lord. Jiminy Christmas. You talked about on your podcast, and we talked about before we started recording, the people that automatically expect or assume, presume, make comments about what they expect you are involved with and why. And we're like, you don't know me. You don't know me at all. So talk to me about expectations and living out of your own versus others.
I am going to give a story time right now, since we're talking about expectations of tall women. I went to the bank the other day, and yes, I went with my mom because even though I'm an adult, I'm still a child and I need help opening a business bank account. So yes, my mom could attest to this because she was a witness. We were at the bank just trying to give the bank teller or whoever the information needed to open the account. Finished, we stood up, and she noticed immediately how tall I was because she looked me up and down twice.
Oh my gosh.
And then she told me, she literally looked at me and asked me, like, "Oh, you model, right?" And I said, "Excuse me?" She's like, "You must be a model. You're literally model height." And I looked at her, I was like, what? I mean, you know what? At this point, I just take a lot of these things as compliments now.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, just because I stood up and I am, I wouldn't say a few inches because she was pretty short, but because I am much taller than you, I am tall in general, you automatically assume that I do this one particular thing. Because that kind of implies that my height defines me as a person. My height determines what I do with myself. My height determines my activities, my careers, etc. And that's not really the case, because without actually trying to get to know me, you wouldn't know that, that like I'm a musician, I'm a college student majoring in this, I'm a freelancer. There are so many other things that I do that don't pertain to being tall that define me as a person and define my personality and my actions and my characteristics rather than my physical traits. And I spoke about this in one of my episodes about how a lot of people associate certain things with people based on their physical traits. And even with race, because I identify as a Black woman and I went to a school where the Black and Hispanic community were just the minorities of that school. And a lot of people, partially also because I'm tall, but it wasn't just me, it was a lot of the other Black kids too, that many of the students assume that they just play basketball.
Yeah.
Because they think, oh, only Black people play basketball. It's like, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So just people will always make expectations of you based on how you look, based off of first impressions, first and foremost. Whether or not you actually take that to heart and whether or not you actually participate in those things is ultimately up to you. It's just you have to figure out what works for you in any and every aspect of your life. You need to figure out what you love to do, what feeds your soul, what makes you happier, what helps you relieve stress. You have to be able to set expectations for yourself that may not necessarily align with other people's expectations. Your expectation is really to make you happy. Your expectation is to find what makes you feel like you're succeeding or you're successful, to what makes you at peace, what brings you joy. That should be your expectations for yourself, and doing the things and participating in the things that I don't know the word, but that like supports that idea.
Yeah.
So trying to live up to other people's expectations listen, if your expectations of yourself and another person's expectation of you are the same exact thing, that's great. It's very rare. Very, very rare. I can say that for sure. But that is phenomenal. Keep doing what you're doing. Live up to yours and their expectations. But you're not necessarily 100% always going to live up to other people's expectations. Yeah. Just like with the whole modeling thing. Like, why are you disappointed that I'm not a model? Like, I just met you today. Like, you don't even know my name.
Yeah. Well, and you spoke to this in your podcast episode, because I listened to when you talked about that, and that's really a lot more about the other person than it is you. It's so remembering that as well.
Yes, because since you said that, because a lot of people's expectations is basically them trying to live a certain part of themselves through you, especially with like the whole parent and child dynamic. I find even in my own family, like there are a lot of things that some family members may not have been able to do when they were younger, at a certain age, because maybe they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the time, they didn't have the capabilities. Some of them had children earlier, so they wouldn't be able to have the time or energy to devote it to that. So they tried to live out the expectations for themselves that they place on themselves through their child. And it could be very toxic. That's what turns kids into people pleasers as well. That's one of the things that turns kids into people pleasers. So I find that a lot of it could be a parental figure. It could also be a friend. It could be a mentor, or anybody who is trying to live out their own life through you. And that's how they have especially unrealistic expectations for you. And you trying to live up to those unrealistic expectations is only going to drive you through the ground. You are not going to be okay in the long run.
No. It will take you down. At some point, It will take you down.
Exactly.
I love, though, you have such a firm grasp on this for somebody, especially for somebody your age. When did you think you got there? When do you think you finally were like, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore? Was it similar to the time that you stopped the people pleasing, where it's like, these things are not working for me anymore? The people pleasing, the living out of other people's expectations, the being concerned about what the person on the street assumes about me, or the people in my life. Was it kind of a similar timeline?
I would say it took a lot of time, because when I first started realizing that I was a chronic people pleaser, like as I said in high school, when they had like a lot of talks and discussions about mental health, it's not like it necessarily stopped right then and there, because I was still a teenager. I was still was I a young adult? I was still a young person.
Yeah.
And I was still trying to fit in. I was still trying to feel accepted by my peers. I was trying to force that acceptance from my peers. So it's not like I was 100% like, yeah, I'm definitely going to say no to everything. That I would say is definitely the start. But the habits that have taken years to form, it's going to take more years to unform that. So it took a while for me to kind of get out. And, I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I still have my moments to this day. I would say it's significantly less than before, but I still do have my moments to this day. But it took many, many years of being disappointed and let down by people. It took many years of feeling drained and exhausted emotionally and mentally because of other people and me just trying to get their acceptance. It just takes years of that, and then just being fed up with that for me to be where I'm at today. And I also have to say that age plays a part in it as well. Because my brain was not as developed back then as it is now, obviously. So I could not think clearly or straight at that time either.
Absolutely.
So getting older, obviously, you learn more and your brain starts to form more, I guess you could say. That's kind of. It took a while. So many, many years. I wouldn't say that particular time I learned to just shut it all off. It's a gradual process, very, very gradual.
Yeah. And you made a good point. Those things that take years to build up, it takes time to change those new habits. The first step is becoming aware. But then within that, you've got to create, okay, what are the next, I'm aware now. How do I change this dynamic? How do I, retrain my brain to process this way, and my nervous system and my habits, So I'm glad you spoke to that. Just patience with ourselves and grace with ourselves as we're doing this. And just being and realizing that part too. I love that. Thanks for speaking to that. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. You talked about earlier that maybe it was in one of the podcast episodes I was listening to, but you talked about how you hated being tall, and you would even slouch to kind of minimize the space you were taking up in the world. And that's just, not fair to you, but that's what the effect of people's expectations, comments, those things were having on you. So talk to me about accepting those layered aspects of yourself, that getting okay with all those parts of you, even, and acknowledge, and that's still an insecurity of mine, but I know that I'm working on it. So talk to me about your layers journey, because that's, I'm sure, a big part of your layers journey and learning to love and appreciate that part of yourself.
So the number one thing is, I'm a business major. And the number one thing with being a business major is problem solving. So it's like, when you identify a problem, how can you fix it? So it's not an issue, but for lack of a better term, we'll just say the issue, the idea of being tall. If it's such a problem, how are you going to fix it? And I mean, I say this a lot in my episodes. If you have the money to get height reduction surgery, that's on you.
Oh my God.
But I mean, if you don't have the money to get the height reduction surgery, if you're not willing to like saw your legs off, saw your knees off, like you can't do anything about it. So there's really no point in complaining about something that's out of your control. And that's like the biggest part of anybody's stress of anything, just stressing over something that they can't control.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that realizing that I can't control how tall I am, I can't control my height, that's just a major part of just letting go of that burden or that weight off of my shoulders of me just constantly talking bad about myself and allowing others to talk badly about me. I just had to let go of the fact that this is something that like I can't change it about me. I can't. So all I have left to do is just to accept and embrace it. And that took a lot of time of like self-reflection and talking it out with others. And the podcast, the Tall Girls podcast, is great help to me in that journey, of course, just finding others and connecting with others who understand the struggle. It just really helps to know that you are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like letting go of the things you can't control and finding a supportive community that really helps in the journey of just really accepting yourself, accepting your quote unquote flaws. Your flaws are perfections, not imperfections. They're what make you unique. This will make you who you are. So I just think that being able to let go of the things that you can't control and finding a community is helpful, and just focusing on the things you can control. Mm-hmm. If there's a random lady on the street like eyeing you and whispering about you because you're tall, then you can control your reaction to that. You don't necessarily have to walk up to her and say, "Hey, shut up." Because next thing you know, she's gonna like have a big fit about it, and who knows what can happen. Are you gonna get into trouble?
Yeah.
Or you could just take a step back and say, like, this lady has no impact on my life. I don't know who she is. She doesn't know who I am.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna walk away because we're never gonna see each other again anyways. So,
yeah.
It's really important to let go of the things you can't control and focus on what you can control. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes things easier, because you're putting your energy towards something that's productive than something that's really going to go nowhere, take you absolutely nowhere. It's just going to cause more stress and more worry in the long run.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that those three things helped me to get to where I am today. And I still have a lot more work to do. I have a long way to go. It is so not over, far from over. We're just in the beginning. So I'm just taking the time and being patient with myself, and a lot like just how we were talking about earlier, feeling our feels. I'm allowing myself to feel my feels and just go through the process, experience the process, because one day I'm going to be in a different phase of my life and I'm not going to be feeling what I'm feeling now, and I'm not going to be doing what I'm doing now. Yeah. Just embracing it, just taking it a day at a time and being patient with myself. Yeah. I can only do so much in a day as a college student.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Well, and I think, you know, those things that are out of your control, it's so interesting to me. And again, it's that reflection on other people's like audacious comments about things that you have no control over. I have no control over the fact my legs are long. I got to put them here. I got to stretch them out. There is nothing I can do about that. And I am not going to apologize to you for how I was created. This is how I was made. And, you know, so it's just interesting. I'm like, you know, even just simple things like how you know, riding on an airplane and having enough space for that. And, you know, it's just wild what people's expectations are. I'm like, just stop for a minute and think about, what it is you're going to say or do, or how you're going to respond. Is this a situation that is there anything anyone can do about it? No, there's not. Oh, so yeah, very interesting. But my husband's 6'3", and so riding on an airplane with him is always interesting. And,
yes.
I'm sure you can, any kind of public transportation.
Oh, yeah.
And how people will just like lean their seats back into him and he'll just be like squished, like, I'm like,
yeah,
do you understand that that's not okay?
Exactly.
Like, he can't shrink himself. This is, oh my gosh. So it's always interesting to me. That was kind of a sidebar, but yeah, that's just kind of that day-to-day stuff. So being able to get to a point where like, that's their thing. That's not my thing. And this is how I'm made. And I'm unique and I'm special. And I'm going to embrace all the parts of this that, that I love about it. And so thank you for speaking to that. All right. In summary, in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, talk to me how this has affected your relationship with yourself and in turn with others. And you spoke to this a little bit earlier about the kind of people you surround yourself with. You surround yourself with those people that are about, feeding the plot and doing those kinds of things. So talk to me about how, as you've become more confident, as you've accepted these things about yourself, as you've set these boundaries, how this has affected the quality of your relationships.
So the relationship with myself definitely improved 120%. I look myself in the mirror and I say, I like this person. It definitely got so much better. I talk to myself much, much better now, more kindly. I try to motivate myself. I try to give myself that space to just feel my feelings, as I said before. I just think I have a very healthy, a much healthier relationship with myself. Like I treat myself like a human being instead of as a robot who needs to go every single day, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. Like,
yeah,
there's no need for all of that. So in doing that, I'm able to learn so much more about myself. And then that relationship with myself, it also like has an impact on the relationship with others, because it's like, treat others how you would want to be treated. And it's like, you want to be treated how you treat yourself, both good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're treating yourself well, you're going to want to surround yourself with people who treat you the same way.
Yeah.
So when you're becoming a different person, a lot of people are going to leave your life, because those are the people that's part of the old you. That's like chapter 7 when we're trying to get to chapter 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're going to leave a lot of people in chapter 7 to make room for the people that are going to be in your chapter 10. So if you start losing a lot of like your mentors, your peers, even the family members, if they just start leaving in your life, it's kind of like you have to remind yourself that it's making way for new people. And that's what I had to do with myself, because at one point it did feel very lonely. It did feel like I didn't have a lot of people to talk to. But now that I can say that I'm a better version of myself than I was when I was younger, I'm able to attract the people who I would want in my life. I'm going to be able to attract the personalities who I want to be surrounded by, who can make me a better person and make me want to become better, make me want to become happier for myself and kinder to myself, kinder to others. So it definitely helps me attract the people who are meant to be in my life. And I'm able to have better and healthier relationships with other people because I have that healthy relationship with myself. Like, no, I'm not going to be disrespectful to you. I'm not going to be toxic to you, because it's like, why would I want you to feel that way? I wouldn't want myself to feel that way.
Yeah.
So because I treat myself well, I want to treat others well and make them feel as good as I do. So that's kind of how that really affected the relationship with myself and my relationship with others.
Yeah, that's really good. Oh, I love how you broke that down. That's beautiful. And I love that you talked about that self-talk piece. We've got to pay attention to that.
How we
That
talk to
has
ourselves.
so much more power than I
Yes.
think we give credit to. And I talk about in some of the episodes that I do and some of the workshops that I do, stop and think for a week. Just take a week and focus on how you're talking to yourself. Write it down in a journal, whatever, and then reframe that. And I love how you spoke to the mirror piece too. Talk to yourself in a mirror, because when you see that reflection of yourself, it's telling your brain and your nervous system that you're talking to a real person. It's almost like you're talking to somebody else, the way your brain processes it. And you'll start believing it and you'll start manifesting that, because your energy and how you feel about yourself does affect the personalities and how the kind of people you attract to your life. And you spoke to too so well. When you go through those changes, when you get okay with yourself, some people are going to fall by the wayside, because you're not going to show up for them in a way anymore that was serving them, but maybe not serving you. They may not like that.
Exactly.
They might not be comfortable for them. That's okay. That's okay. And you're making room for those people that are for you, because those relationships matter. But yeah, you spoke to all those things so well. Thank you so much for that. We are down to our rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Okay, I spoke about those a little bit earlier, 2 of them at least.
Yeah.
And I was playing the bass clarinet and walking. Those 2 things are definitely what feed my soul for sure.
Yeah.
Another thing is eating. Eating is great. I like eating, mainly because I'm hungry a lot, but I'm younger. So yeah, I'm going to be hungry a lot.
Yes.
But eating is very important, and making sure that I get my food in for the day. So I think that is good. And then also another thing with walking is just sitting in the sun. There was this thing at one point going around about vitamin D therapy. That's so true. Just going outside. Even if you stand in the sun for 5 minutes, you'll leave that place or that area just feeling like a different person. There's a lot of. I'm a business major. I'm not a science person, but I'm assuming there's a lot of science to back the fact that the sun can play a positive role in your emotions for sure.
Yeah.
So that's 4. And then the 5th one is probably just being around the people that I love to be around, socializing with great people, socializing with my friends, socializing with my family members, just being able, because, we're humans, we're social creatures, and just living in solitude is not, it's it's good to spend time by yourself, but too much time by yourself can also do weird things to your brain.
Absolutely.
Socializing with those people, the good people, is definitely a good thing for me as well.
Awesome. I love that you spoke to that. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Oh dear. 6 months. Okay. So what are we in? We're November. So December, January, February, March, April.
You're being close to graduation.
Yeah. Okay. So number 1, I want to feel relieved.
Yes.
I will have finished my undergraduate career, and I will be able to I'm going to go to graduate school, but I'm going to take a little bit of time off so I can have a little bit of a breather, which is nice. So I definitely want to feel relieved. And then on top of that, I also want to feel prepared, because I want to be prepared to go out into the real world and start adulting. As you said before, I want to feel prepared to go out into the real world and just start living my life, going into my career, going to grad school, making those changes, moving. Just so much. So I want to feel prepared and ready for that, and not anxious about it all.
Yeah.
And I also want to feel happy and excited. I want to be happy and excited that I'm able to finish out this chapter in my life, and excited and happy to move on to the next chapter, that I was able to get to this point, because I'm lucky enough to be where I'm at now. And I would be lucky enough to be at the point where I'm going to be in the next 6 months. So that for sure. So 4. And then I think another thing is probably just be at peace. just at peace with a lot of things, because there was a lot of things that happened, especially during the pandemic. A lot of changes were made, and I feel like there's a lot of changes that I haven't fully processed yet. I don't even think I fully processed that I'm a senior yet either.
Yeah.
So I just want to be at peace with everything and be able to just say that, yes, these things happened, and for better, for worse, it's time to move on to what's coming next. So
yeah,
at peace is definitely a big one for me, along with feeling relieved.
yeah, absolutely. That with big capital letters.
Yeah, capital letters.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, India, thank you so much for that. All right. Tell people where they can follow you, find you. This will also be on our sources page on the website. So if you're driving down the freeway, ladies, it's okay. This will be, but throw a quick, where we can find you and then and places to follow you, that kind of stuff.
Of course. So I'm at a Tall Girls podcast everywhere on Instagram, on TikTok, on Pinterest. Yeah, that's really just those three places. Oh, on Facebook. I'm on Facebook too, y'all. At a Tall Girls podcast. That's all going to be linked in their information. I also have a website, www.atallgirlspodcast.com, where all my episodes live, all my blogs live and stuff. So you can check those out there as well. So everything is relatively straightforward. You just got to remember a Tall Girls podcast and you're pretty much there.
You're there. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for that. India, this has been such a great conversation today. I'm so glad that I was able to connect with you and talk to you. So much wisdom. I think that we lose, one of the things on this podcast, I like to have women of all ages on here because there's so much we can learn from each other. And you dropped so much wisdom today that I was like, dang, she's got that figured out already. That is amazing. So thank you so much. Thanks for the work you do on behalf of all the tall girls out there and on behalf of all the women dealing with anything on the body image front, because so much of what you talk about is applicable across the board. And it's conversations that we have to have to process and feel like we're not alone in it. And also for people in general to have an awareness, maybe think about what you say the next time.
Exactly.
or the assumptions that you make when you're approaching someone who's looks different or is having a different experience than you. So I think it's a good reminder from that front as well. But audience, you can go to, again, bracinglayers.com. Our website's going to have this episode. It's going to have a blog about this episode. It's going to have the resources that India shares. That's all going to be there at embracinglayers.com. So go there. But thanks so much, India, for being here with us this week. Good luck on finals. And,
oh, dear.
And finishing out your senior year. But first, enjoy being done with midterms. Let's start there.
Of course. Thank you so much, Melissa, for having me on and reaching out and what you do with your podcast as well. This is so great. And I'm so glad to be here. So I just thank you so much for that. I'm so happy.
Absolutely. Well, I'm honored. And she let me into one of her off-limit days a little bit. So I'm honored too that I was allowed into some of that Friday space to record. So I appreciate that.
I had to make time for this one.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Well, I'm glad that we made time for each other. This has been so great. Audience, again, you know where to go, embracinglayers.com. Thanks for joining us and have a great week.